Welcome to On the Record, a joint production of the Ellensburg Daily Record and Central Washington University. I'm Joanna Markell, the editor of the Daily Record, here with CWU President Jim Gaudino, and we'll be talking about issues that affect both CWU and the community in these regular conversations. And today we'll be talking about higher education funding and the state legislature, plans at CWU for a new park, possibly.
Correct. And
plans for the Alumni Association, among other topics. If you have any questions, suggestions for us, feel free to email us. My email is jmarkell, M-A-R-K-E-L-L, @kvnews.com, or you can find the Daily Record on Facebook and post a question there. So what is the status of CWU in the state legislature right now?
Well, I wish I could answer that.
Probably you should preface it by saying the special session, as we are taping this, is not over at this point.
That is correct. Yeah, it is not over. And as probably many of the viewers know, there was some complications a couple of weeks ago when the Senate Republicans had, I think, 3 Democrats cross over the party lines to their side and create a new Senate budget that was then adopted and then was sent over to the House. So we now have what has typically been a disagreement between how the House and the Senate would resolve the budget problem. That still exists, but we now have a partisan look at the budget. And it's a complicated thing. I think there's some well, I don't know if we'll have a budget by the end of the special session. We could well have a second special session.
How is higher education faring?
Well, we're faring better in both the House and the Senate budget, which means that on the Democratic side on the House and the Republican side in the Senate, we're actually faring better than we did in the initial projections that were put out by the governor in her in her budget. So we could be seeing, relatively speaking, small supplemental cuts to our budget, up to the possibility of no cuts or a slight increase in the budget for Central. So we're faring much better than we went into session thinking we were going to do.
And CWU has a longer range budget plan that goes out for several years.
Well, we do.
And how does this fit into that?
Well, we've been assuming that for the next, let's say, 6 years, we're looking at a 6-year budget, sliding budget window, and by statute we can only approve a biennial budget, but we're looking at and, if you will, endorsing the subsequent 4 years, and of course that just slides every year. We'll look at a more distant 6-year window. We're assuming that for the next 6 years we'll see a decline in state support, offset by an increase both in the an increase in enrollment, keeping the enrollment at these historically high levels, but also having an increase in tuition. So we're seeing, if you will, the privatization of the economic model for higher education in Washington.
So how is enrollment holding at this point?
Enrollment is looking very good. We're slightly above our projections. We budgeted 9,800 full-time equivalent students. We actually have about 11,000 total students, but not all of them take a full course load. So when we do that computation to how many equivalent full-time students we have, we're a little over 9,800. 9,800 was our budgeted amount, so we're holding quite good. Our applications are very strong for next year. The profile of the student is actually improving. That's applying for Central. So all in all, it looks pretty good.
And then how is the tuition component faring? Is it
no, it's going up. I mean, that's the really bad news. You know, I've been saying on campus that the worst of the times is behind us. But really, it's for the wrong reasons. I wish it was because the state was going to return to supporting higher education. I just don't see that happening. I don't think they can. I think they would like to, but I don't think they have the resources to do so. So I think we're going to see increased tuition. So the good news is that Central can begin to reinvest in the university. The bad news is that it's almost entirely at the expense of our students.
And I think in the budget there was 14%.
There's 14% in the year that we're in, and there's already been an approval for a 14% for next year. That was in the original budget, the biennial budget that the trustees approved. That's subject to change. They could always reverse their decision and increase it or decrease it from that 14%. But I don't see the potential for them decreasing it. It's just the money's not there.
And in terms of staffing, the number of faculty you have on campus. Will this budget affect that?
Well, it should. This budget should allow us. If we had planned on a fairly sizable decrease, and keep in mind now, it's Washington is the only state I've ever read about that has negative supplementals. Usually the word supplemental means more. Here we take money away in supplemental budgets. So we've already had a lot of money taken away from us in this fiscal year. And in next fiscal year, the discussion really is how much more to take away from us. So hopefully they won't take more away from us, and we'll just live with the cut that they've already made. With the steady enrollment patterns and the increase in tuition, we should be able to invest in more staff, in our goods and service operational budget, and to begin to repair some of the cuts that we had to make when I arrived here in '09. We should start to see a slight change to that, and we can put some of those, either those positions back. I actually talked to the campus. I foresee 4 categories of funding requests, and in no particular order of importance or priority. But you know, we're a staff at the university that has gone 4 years without any compensation increases. We're losing our national competitiveness. We're losing faculty and staff to other careers, and it's becoming harder to recruit people. So we're going to have, and that's the case with all the 6 of the public baccalaureate universities in Washington. So we're going to have to make some changes there. So that will be one request for information. In some cases, we've had to overcut. So we have too few staff in some positions, regardless on the faculty side or on the staff side of our university. We're going to have to replace some people that were, and most of the positions were positions that were not filled. They were frozen because of attrition. So we'll have to put some of those back into the budget. There'll be goods and service budgets. We've delayed a number of costs that just by deferring purchases of important supplies and equipment and maintenance on facilities. So we're going to have to start doing that. And then the fourth will be beginning to build new programs to match the needs of the state. So those will be the 4 categories, and the real challenge will be we'll not have enough money to do them all at once, and putting priorities to those 4 categories.
I think this is the first time we've talked, and we haven't talked about cuts.
Yes, no, this is good news. I mean, this is actually a positive conversation. I've been saying to the campus when I've had a chance to speak in small groups that it's sometimes more difficult to add money back than it is to cut money, because when you're cutting, everybody kind of rallies together and sees how they can save. And when you're adding money, you don't have enough to satisfy all the needs. So we're going to have to create priorities and say no to a few, and say later to a few, and say yes to a few. And that's going to be our challenge.
We also didn't talk about capital budget funding.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of projects? We've talked before about just how construction projects on campus affect the entire community,
Absolutely.
Specifically the residence hall and Hogue Hall, which have been
Right.
under construction here. And we've also talked that it may be shrinking back a little bit as some of those projects come to a close. So what does it look like?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, we won't see a major capital budget, of course. We're in a supplemental sessions. So next year will be the really important capital budgeting year. And really, I think it's anybody's guess of what that's going to look like. I know one of the discussions in Olympia is lowering the debt limit for the state. And if that happens, of course, that would have a negative impact on the overall capital budgets. The size of the state operating budget, of course, relates to that. And then we have to get in line with all the other priorities and compete. Now, we're in a pretty good position in that we're designing 2 buildings. So what we call Science 2 building is the second major science construction. And also the Samuelson, what used to be the student union, is also in design, building to return to an academic building. And so if patterns hold, we'll get construction money for those. Now, there's a real question whether patterns will hold. And then we're in the planning stages for really a 3rd science building for exercise health sciences. And that building hopefully will get money, or that project will get money to design that building in the next budget year. So if all goes well, we'll continue with the kind of building pattern that we've gotten used to. I'm cautiously optimistic, with an underline on cautiously optimistic.